Imagine you're high on the mountain and there's no light anywhere. It's dark. And in the cabin, sitting there at the foot of Grandpa, he leans forward and he tells these stories. All the stories about the people who came before. The people who came from Scotland and Ireland and Germany and all the old country. They came carrying a sack of creativity on their shoulders. They came and settled here in all this valley and all the mountains. And they grew vegetables. They raised cattle. They raised family. And one after the other, I realized how fortunate I was to be from the mountains. He was such a wonderful storyteller. Sometimes, though, he'd tell me stories and make the hair stand up on the back of my neck. It'd be so scary. Like the time he told us about the panther. Now, you see, he said to me, I want to tell you young'uns a tale about your grandma and how she saved the life of 3 of our young'uns. It was raining the day it happened. The thunder was coming across the ridges. And it was early morning, about 5 o'clock. You see, Grandpa was a foreman at a lumber camp. And this was over in Jackson County. He had a lumber camp over, I think it was called Cherry Gap. And Grandma was the cook. So every morning, when he went over to do the work and to guide the men, and she would follow him because she had the 3 young'uns. She had Bryson. Bryson stood about this tall. And then there was Jim. He stood about this tall. And then there was Albert, a baby. She carried him in her arms. So it was dark and rainy when she went out the door to go up and cross through the woods. She had to go by the way of the old Larson Trail, winding around all through the mountains. When she got into the woods, and she could hear it. The pat, pat, pat up above her. Something walking in the dead leaves. Close, real close to her. And she held that baby tight. And she thought, well, I better move fast. And she went walking down the trail, the boys right beside of her. And she stopped a little ways on further and listened, and there it was. The pat, pat, pat of something walking in the dead leaves. Young'uns, stay close to me, she said. And she went walking fast. She got to just before she was to go down to the lumber camp, and she stopped to listen, and she knew it was there. She could feel his eyes on her. It was close. She could just, goose quills crawled up and down her spine, she said. And she went on down to the lumber camp. Tom, she told Grandpa, something followed me all the way here, and I'm a little afeared to go home. He said, well, it's coming this bad storm. He says, why don't you just make us some breakfast and then we'll all leave. So she went into the kitchen. She put those young'uns down on the floor. And she cooked breakfast. Then she washed dishes and she put all the dishes away. And while she was doing that, she pulled out her drawer, took out a butcher knife, put it in her apron pocket. Just in case, she thought. Out the door she went. Tom, I'm leaving. And away she went through the woods. He said, I'll be right behind you. And she got up into the woods, and she knew it was there. She could feel it. She just knew it was there. So she walked as fast as she could, and she got to a bend in the road where right around that next bend was going to be a big oak tree with a limb hanging out over the path. And she knew if anything would be waiting on her, it'd be there. She told the boys, "Hang on to my dress tail, boys." She took out the butcher knife, and around the bend she went. And there he was, the biggest black panther she'd ever seen, laying on that limb. As she screamed, "Run, boys!" And they took off running, and she stepped forward, held that baby tight, and that panther leaped, come down on top of Grandma and that baby. And that's what Grandpa saw when he come running around with the boys. He ran over. He picked the panther up and held it up like this, and there's the knife stuck in its heart. Grandma got up, dusted her skirt off, looked at her kids, said, "Tom, we best be getting on home. These young'uns are all tired out." And when Grandpa told me that story, I knew if Grandma was strong and she faced that panther, I could face a panther. Because panthers come in all shapes and sizes. Sometimes they have 2 legs instead of 4. So I knew that I could live fearlessly. Or at least try. So, you know, the stories that you tell, the stories have a moral to them. So listen carefully when your aunts and uncles and grandma and grandpa and your mom and dad tell you stories, because they will help you live your own life.